look at productization, and it's remarkable. We are working in such a similar way at Silverchair, but I'm not going to talk much about that today because I want to talk about something a little bit broader, and that's a proposal for how we build a piece of infrastructure for our industry that allows us to advance the development of these types of technologies in a way that we can leverage together to create more value for our users. So I'm gonna quickly spin through the basic purpose of taxonomies. Silverman gave you a sophisticated view, and I'm going to just retouch on a bit of that. Then I want to talk about the difference between domain and enterprise taxonomies, which is sort of at the heart of this notion of Taxonomy Commons. How we create value for information users going forward in our industry generally, and then talking just a little bit about the opportunity ecosystem that we could create with such an infrastructure and how we might organize that. So the basic purpose is, and some of this will be reiterative, I guess pedagogically that's good. You get to hear it again, it will sink in, hear it from a slightly different perspective. But as was earlier pointed out, we're trying to normalize the classification of information objects according to topic or meaning. That's the fundamental notion of taxonomization. And the purpose of normalization is to allow it to be computable. So again, as we pointing out, as human beings, our brains are incredibly complex and can immediately know the difference between HIV, one with a space or without a space. But the computer, as sophisticated as it is, doesn't know that difference. And so we've got to come up with that normalization. And what we're trying to do is to enhance simultaneously recall and precision. So in information retrieval science, you think about this sort of fundamentally conflicted notion. I either get great recall, which means I have a very broad set and I capture everything in the world, but then I get what I get at Google, which is 73,000 pages of results, and it's too much. Or I can have precision, but precision frequently risks excluding certain information. And so to be able to enhance both of those axes at the same time is really the holy grail, and that's what we're trying to do with this smart content notion or taxonomic notion. Here's just another illustration. This comes from a real example. We have a real chapter from a neurology book where the author has decided to call sensation disorders disordered sensation. So we took that to PubMed, and we found that if you put in disordered sensation, which was the author's idiosyncratic expression, we got 215 results. But as it turns out, that's a tiny fraction of what's really there. And so when you normalize that term to sensation disorders, you get the comprehensive set. So you're trying to make sure that you are calling the same thing everywhere you go and getting the full set of results that are relevant. So right now, we're in a space in our industry where organizations are committing significant resources to developing taxonomies. This is an emerging trend. When you hear it from Elsevier, you tend to know that, although I'll point out, it was interesting to me, he's got 5 people on his team. So at Silverchair, we actually have about 12 doing the same thing. So, it's a rare day when you get to say you're doing something bigger than Elsevier, but I'll take my chance when I can. But at any rate, organizations are putting significant resources into building enterprise taxonomy. And for the vast majority of us, I think Elsevier is frequently an outlier in this sense just because they have so much content. But for the vast majority of us, that's challenging. What's happening is we have this notion that we're breaking down silos. Silos is one of these favorite metaphors of our industry, right? We're talking about breaking down silos. So we're breaking down the silos by turning content into XML, and we're gonna build an enterprise taxonomy, and that's gonna let us know what content we have, but we're actually creating new silos when we're doing that. So just to give you a very simplistic view, so we started out, we've got these, ancillary is now probably a bigger box than it's sort of catch-all category. But we look at our content and we say, well, we got these silos and we don't know how to make them talk to one another. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to break it down into XML. And we're going to understand what all the constituent structures are, and we're going to know what they are. And then we're going to overlay this taxonomy. All right? And so now we have this wonderful situation where we understand at a granular level the topical content, the content that we have on a topical basis, and can present that to customers. The problem is, when you do this on an enterprise level, and unless you're Elsevier, what you've got is now your taxonomy and the organization next door's taxonomy and the other publisher's taxonomy. And so now we have new challenges, which is to say, while we have broken down our own silos, we've created new silos in terms of interacting throughout the industry. Now, you may say, well, that's all right. I'm not too worried about having my content interact with his content or her content or the next company's content. But actually, that's where we're going. I think the diminution, and it's a topic for another talk, the diminution of the proprietary copyright or IP asset in value as a business proposition is happening as we speak from a variety of different perspectives. And the business models are going to require global integration of content going forward. So we don't want to just create new silos in the process of thinking that we're breaking down the silos we have. So let's learn something from UMLS. And you heard a bit about UMLS and how Emmett is related to UMLS. This will look very similar to you. This is a system we have. So we're talking about ephemeral hernia. We've detected that in various vocabularies, both represented in UMLS or in common usage, or in that either abbreviations or others, that there are other equivalents for this term, and we've got a database much like what you saw in Shivram's presentation that allows us to equate these and then process that. So in our system, whenever possible, we connect the term back to UMLS because we don't want to be proprietary. We want to be as universal as we can. And UMLS itself is something that it's a very interesting case study for. Let me just stop there. It comprises about roughly 100, maybe a little bit more, individual taxonomies from different organizations, some of which you'll be familiar with, like MESH or SNOMED, or the ICD codes, et cetera, et cetera. And it's an effort of the National Library of Medicine to retrospectively map these together into a meta-thesaurus that, at its simplest level, we're sort of trying to connect the equivalent concepts between those vocabularies. Now, medicine is frequently you can look at it as the canary in the coal mine, or clinical medicine in particular kind of leads the charge frequently because the workflow applications are in such high demand and have such high value that you see these technologies develop. My view is that we're going to need the same kind of infrastructure in all professional and scholarly content domains. The challenge that UMLS had is that it had to go back and retrospectively create this mapping. And can we get in front of that at some basic level as an industry by creating some kind of standardization before we need to go back? And so UMLS is a patch, if you will. And so can we get in front of that and not create a situation where we have to have a patch? So what can we learn from UMLS going forward? So how are we? I'm going to slide through this because Shivram's examples are great, but our view is that we see happening around us. First of all, search is diminishing. It may sound like anathema. I don't mean Google is diminished by search. I mean product search once you're out of Google and into a resource. From that point forward, what we see is a tremendous diminution of search inside of specific applications. And so what you have is you're here in an article on hip fracture management, and it is a very simple example, but you're trying to sort of say, okay, specifically, what are the other things that might need to be surfaced in this environment? And we can relegate search, and the user can actually use a page as a navigation tool itself by the virtue of connecting current content and related content. So here's an example from JAMA that we've just tied into PubMed. Now, when Shivram was talking, he was speaking mainly about Elsevier assets, which are obviously quite substantial, but when I'm talking about moving beyond the enterprise walls and wanting to make connections, PubMed's a simple example. But if a person's reading about this particular topic, at least in medicine, they're going to want to kind of look across the field and not necessarily be limited to a single publisher or a single journal. And so you're going to want to have these integrations. And these integrations go well beyond this. They go into integrating with guidelines databases and clinical trials databases and so on and so forth. And the ability to do that dynamically through this machinable relationship is the key concept here. So our belief in this ecosystem is that going forward, our businesses are not going to be simply about owning a copyright and presenting that proprietary copyrighted unit of information, whether that's a brand or an article or a book or a chapter, to a user. That is going to become commoditized, to some extent already is commoditized by forces beyond our control. And so where the opportunities to create value are is using a fundamental infrastructure of systematic content exchange and then creating higher efficiency for users through information dashboards and workflow integrations, passive discovery. So the example I was sort of showing in the JAMA example, you didn't go and say, well, I've read this article and now I'll go to PubMed and now I'll execute another search and now I'll see what's there. It's all sort of integrated together. So these are where the business opportunities are going to be. So I propose that we create in our industry something along the lines of CrossRef and UMLS, except for a broader and less domain-specific infrastructure called Taxonomy Commons. And the notion of Taxonomy Commons is that it will enable and support dynamic exchange of information between organizations, institutions, and individuals by collaborating, develop, maintain, and enhance open source domain standard taxonomies. Now let me make a point. A lot of what Shivaram was showing you are second and third order enhancements to taxonomies. I want to make the distinction between taxonomy and ontology. So if you remember back to his slide where he was talking about acromegaly, and he had some orange things which were essentially the key terms. And then there were all the rest of those relationships with the thinner lines. Those are ontological expressions that discuss relationships. And I don't think it's possible yet for us to have a giant industry standard normalized ontological infrastructure. I'm starting with something much simpler, and that is at the taxon level, where we're just representing the concepts in their hierarchical form. I think that is an edge where standardization and sharing and open source will then stimulate business opportunities based on those other ontological developments and so on and so forth. So let's be clear that I don't suggest that we develop an industry-wide, in all domains, common ontological infrastructure. At the taxon level, we all call acromegaly, instead of calling it 5 different things. And then from there, we can move on to developing individual organization-specific business opportunities. So I propose that Taxonomy Commons will be a not-for-profit membership organization with a board of directors and representing academia and commercial not-for-profit publishers. Its purpose will be to create and/or, I should have said and/or, maintain shared domain taxonomies so that organizations can encode information with interoperable metadata. And the goal is to have a permanent, secure, collaboratively governed, industry-standard taxonomy ecosystem. This organization will have a cloud-based technical infrastructure to receive taxonomies, house them, and distribute them. It will have a staff that maintains and updates constituent taxonomies on a variety of different inputs, including, of course, member submissions. And one of the things that, interestingly, this provides, as I've gone around and talked to societies that represent various knowledge domains and have critical mass, there's a tremendous interest in sharing these not-for-profits, non-governmental organizations who have a knowledge map or knowledge infrastructure. How can they share that across their domain, not just across their organization, and don't yet have an infrastructure for doing that? So this provides a technical and managerial infrastructure for them to deposit and then share those, and it can be consortia of different. So you could get all the physics organizations together, all microbiology organizations together, et cetera, and collaborate and share across those lines. The notion is that the taxonomies will be open source, and that any party who agrees to the Creative Commons license that would be relevant would have access to download them, and there would be membership in the organization, and there would be relevant fees based on your size and the corporate structure and so on and so forth. Again, similar to the CrossRef infrastructure. Members, in my view, the benefit of membership would be real-time API-based access to the taxonomy so that they could be integrated with the products and services that are being created by the members, and that non-members could download taxonomies because it's open source, but they would not have the same access to the technical infrastructure to integrate it into their products. So that would encourage membership. So it's a notion, and I've discussed it with a number of commercial and not-for-profit publishers and standards organizations, and we're going to take it forward. I welcome email inquiries. We have a very brief two-pager white paper that we can share with you all if you have an interest, and keep your eyes and ears open as we develop the concept further. Thank you very much.